We will now reconvene the regular meeting of the Lompoc City Council for Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Vega.
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Present.
Councilmember Cordova.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jeremy Ball.
Present.
Mayor Janelle Osborne.
Here. Mr. Malavi, any reportable action from closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. City Council met tonight in closed session to discuss the two items on the agenda, one existing litigation item and one labor negotiations item. Council discussed both those items, gave direction to staff, but there was no reportable action.
Thank you so very much. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Albro, the floor is yours for City Manager report.
Thank you. I wanted to congratulate everybody who participated in the library challenge. I know the goal was 100,000 minutes to the summer library challenge, and they did actually 155,915 minutes. They had 347 people who participated. They had reviewed 216 books, and they also read 2,181 books. So congratulations to everybody who participated in that. Also wanted to thank the Parks Division. I came in this weekend, and they were out there working. You'll notice a lot of new rocks, landscaping, some bark. It's starting to look really good. I want to thank them for their efforts. I also wanted to thank the facilities. Like, same time facilities was putting in new glass doors. Be careful, we don't have decals on them. They also put in a drinking fountain, and they're doing a lot of painting and moving stuff around, trying to get us for the upgrades to the chamber that we're going to do. So I want to thank them for coming in the weekend so we can conduct business during the week without interference. So thank you, guys.
Any questions for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent calendar. If you would like to speak on any item on consent calendar, you may come to the podium or call in at 805-875-8201, 805-875-8201, and remember to mute your TV, PC, or radio. Did we have any written communications on consent calendar, Madam Clerk?
No, ma'am, nothing.
All right. While we wait to see if there are any calls, I'll read a consent calendar process. Items listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted after one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the council vote. Any items withdrawn from the consent calendar for separate discussion will be addressed immediately before the second oral communication near the end of the meeting. Seeing no one call in or rise to the podium, we will close public comment on consent calendar and bring it back to the council. Is there an item that anyone would like to pull or have questions on? Councilmember Starbuck.
One question, item 3, physical impact. When we go into the physical impact of it here, we say 200,000 additional appropriations from right-of-way maintenance fund are requested to cover increased cost and contingencies. Right-of-way maintenance is also known as enterprise reimbursement.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the money that the utilities reimburses. This is a special revenue fund, and all those funds, you get to be used for all the damages the utilities do to the roads. So it's to improve the alley and some of the dig outs.
This is part of that frozen fund.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Ball.
I'll make a motion to accept consent calendar.
Do I have a second? And Cordova seconds. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's vote. Consent calendar passes 5-0. We'll now open the floor for oral communications for items not currently on the agenda. So if you would like to speak on items not on the agenda, you may come forward. You have 3 minutes at the podium, or you may call in at 805-875-8201. 805-875-8201. The floor is now yours.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna stand up for this. No, I got everything, just go do the thing. You've done good, Nikolai Kashenko. Victor knows I gotta laugh before I get serious. Okay. My name's Dan Petrie, and I've been a public figure in this town since I was 8 years old. This is the proof. I was one of the best baseball players to ever come out of the village. I was MVP every team I was ever on. And after my career was over, I became a professional entertainer. I've been a Leonard Skinner tribute artist since 1989. I've opened the Flower Festival for 17 years, and I was on the entertainment committee for 10 years. The reason I'm coming here is because in 1980, I married one of the prettiest girls to ever come out of this valley. She was 18, I was 20, legally married. I got a job at Diablo Canyon as a security guard. At Diablo Canyon, the sheriff's department planted an undercover narc. Yeah. This narc went around falsifying police reports on 4 security guards, and I was one of them. In this report, he claims I sold him $30 worth of marijuana, okay? I was a star baseball player. I'd even drink a beer till I was 21 years old, okay? His name was Alan Christopher, but that was a fake name. His real name was Leonard Lehane. He was a career criminal like Charlie Manson, with a record this long, 3 pages long. I'm a 20-year-old newly married security guard up against this guy all by myself. I called 911 for 3 days. The police never answered. Why? Because he was working for them. Charlie Manson working for the police as a narc against a 20-year-old baseball player. On the 3rd day of stalking my wife, he tried to rape her. I stood between him and a gun, protected my wife. After he tried to rape my wife, I was then arrested on a felony warrant because he falsified a police report that said I sold him $30 worth of marijuana. I have the report. Go to What Good is Government, Dan Petrie's Battle with Corrupt Cops on YouTube. I explain the whole case. This is why I filed 2 police corruption lawsuits against this town. But the Lompoc Record, nobody will ever tell you this why. They won't tell you why. They made me out the criminal, and this community has ostracized me ever since. I drive around the community in my red convertible Camaro, and I get flipped off. It's gone on for 40 years, and I'm sick of it. I'm the victim. Pretty obvious. But nobody will tell anybody that, so people think I'm the criminal. It's like being OJ, but you didn't commit the crime. You follow me? So that's what I have to say. Then I have to say is Michael Rupert spoke in front of the CIA and told the CIA, directed to his face, that the CIA is bringing all the drugs in the country, especially in LA. And obviously I've lived here a long time, and I want to know why the drug flow hasn't been stopped over the past 30 or 40 years. The millions of dollars of meth that's flown through this town, why has it not been stopped? And I also have a TV show where I bring on other victims of police crime. It's called Cops, hosted by Dan Petrie, all 8 episodes on YouTube, and you'll know everything I know about police corruption. And I'm asking whoever cops are here, I have had death threats. I've got tombstones on my fence because of this case. And I can't get any cops, except FBI agents, to investigate, because they're not going to investigate their own corruption. And that's all I have to say.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, residents of Lompoc. My name is Nick Nikolenko, and I'm coming for you to something needs to be done in this community. This is not a safe community as it once was. Crime since 2019 has gotten way out of control. Violent crime in this community has gotten way out of control. The gangs are taking over neighborhoods. Drugs are pouring to the city nonstop. There's overdoses nightly. nightly overdoses. Why? Why can we not get a handle of what is destroying our community? Why can we not get a handle on the crime in this community? I keep hearing the police department needs more funding. Police department needs more funding. What's happening with that funding? Raises. Where are the new officers that are supposed to be patrolling the streets? We have no traffic department. We have no gang task force. We have no drug task force. It's all under Special Investigations Unit. So one unit is dedicated to all the violent crime here in the community, whatever it's gangs, whatever it's drugs, whatever it is. We need trained officers to deal with the gang epidemic in our community. I, myself, was out walking my dog a few months ago, and a car was driving very slowly up my street, and they stopped in the middle of my street. Then they drove up, stopped in the middle of the street by my parking lot. They waited a few minutes, then drove off. Next thing I know, one street over, bang, bang. They were looking for a target. I was out walking my dog. What if I had looked like who they were looking for? I would not be here tonight, possibly, because I'd be an innocent bystander. I'd be an innocent victim of the crime here in Lompoc. How many innocent people have died at the hands of violence in this community? This needs to stop. Our community deserves better. Thank you.
Matt and Colleen, Lompoc, California. Hello, Mayor Osborne and the City Council. Thanks for having us this evening. My wife and I recently started a chapter of a nonprofit called Sleep in Heavenly Peace, and our organization builds beds for children. They build beds with the community for children that don't have beds of their own. We serve North Santa Barbara County, 12 zip codes up here, including Lompoc and Santa Maria. And we raise money with individuals, with organizations and businesses to build the beds, and then we deliver them based on applications that come in. Anyone can apply from 3 years old to 17 years old, as long as they don't have a bed of their own. We are a national nonprofit. The organization has built over 133,000 beds. Our chapter just opened up on May 30th, and in 60 days, we have delivered 100 beds, both here in Lompoc and Santa Maria. There's a huge need for it here. Between 8,000 and 12,000 children in North Santa Barbara County don't have a bed of their own. That's an estimation, but very large numbers, so we've just scratched the surface. While our main goal is to get children off the floor, an added benefit is bringing an often divided community together to help build these beds. So we just wanted to introduce ourselves, introduce Sleep in Heavenly Peace, and say we're very excited to serve in Lompoc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb Andrews, Lompoc. The new small trees planted along the sidewalk to City Hall are very attractive. Thank you. In 1956, the United States Congress adopted "In God We Trust" as the official motto of the United States. I'm glad to see "In God We Trust" return to the wall in the lobby after the paint job. The Old Town Market on Fridays has eclectic offerings for the public. It's just amazing, as well as very beautiful babies. The large public parking lots on I Street are a convenient option for parking nearby. Unfortunately, the planters on the lots of the City of Arts and Flowers are neglected. The planters would add beauty and warmth to the area if they were replanted and cared for. Tall weeds were growing in the cracks in the asphalt of the parking lot. I know the City Council just passed a weed ordinance, so we should set a good example. Thursday, I attempted to drink from the drinking fountain on the sidewalk adjacent to the parking lot. It did not work. Not a drop of water came out of the fountain. I don't know what's going on with the fountains, but please repair them so that citizens have an opportunity to quench their thirst. For many, Sundays is a day families have the opportunity for an outing together. On Sunday, I stopped by the Anderson Recreation Center to observe activities. It was locked and dark. Anybody's guess when it's open, hours and days of operation were not listed at the entrance. The internet just said closed. I don't know if it's permanently closed. 20 years ago, the Anderson Rec Center needed a paint job but never got it. The landscaping is neglected. The Lompoc Library is also closed on Sundays. Citizens have testified of the need for youth activities in Lompoc at this podium numerous times. I urge you to open the rec center and library on Sundays, offer youth activities, a day many children and parents have the opportunity to engage in quality time together. Who do you represent?
Good evening, Mayor Osborne and members of the City Council. I'm Ann McCarty, Executive Director for the North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center. Just wanted to take a moment to stop in and publicly thank you, Mayor Osborne, Councilman Ball, and PIO Samantha Scroggins for attending an event on Thursday, July 21st at the North County Rape Crisis Center in conjunction with the American Association of University Women hosted at the Hilton Garden Inn, where we welcomed 11 bicycle riders that are traveling from Seattle, Washington to San Diego to raise awareness regarding the issue of human trafficking. It's no secret that human trafficking is indeed an issue on the Central Coast, and it's been an honor to be able to collaborate with Pedal the Pacific, a nonprofit organization out of the state of Texas that raises money as well as awareness regarding this severe issue that cripples our country. But what was special was the fact that members of our city council were there to participate with us. And for these 11 riders who travel from, like I said, down the coast of the United States, the West Coast, and they're stopping at a bunch of little towns and big cities along their travels. The welcome that they receive from the city of Lompoc is really parallel to none, and they talk about that a lot along their journey. And to receive the key to the city was indeed special, but to have representatives from the city there at the table breaking bread with us and talking to these young women about the things that they're learning, their advocacy efforts that we know that will spread out into the United States with whatever they do in their life was indeed special, and I just wanted to publicly thank you, so thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rafaela Moreno, and I am here since you all, as a city council and mayor, are very interested to hear the community. I'm here as a community member, insisting and to hear about what you thought after reading and looking at the motorsports project copy that I left 2 months ago here. I haven't heard from many of you. I would like to hear what is it that we can do as community to unite and work with you towards favoring this project that I continue hearing since I live on D and College. I can continue hear constantly, day and night, the need of that racetrack, so those that do love that sport, to have an assigned and safe area to do so. I have been speaking with the community. I am hearing that there is support since you are our representatives as this community, and I do believe that we don't need so many people here to show that support. I'm gathering it on document and meeting outside here and in the parks to hear the interest from clubs that exist here in the community and supporting of this sports project. I would like to hear from any of you, since I've been waiting for 4 months already, have given you already my phone number, to understand how we can, what is it, why not? Why or when can we see more possibility to have this project on the agenda? And having the input from the community to give it to you, if that's one thing that you are waiting for. It is a safety need. There is, in that cross street and D and College, there is a need for attention as far as the traffic goes. I'm sure you have record of all the accidents that have that happen in that intersection. And I am not going to say it's because they're racing, but that also happens there. Not only the accidents, but also the racing part, which is an urgent need to pay attention to that. So I just here continuing asking you to consider this project, look at it, and hear from the community. And I'm here to be a voice from you to the community and vice versa. And that's pretty much what I'm continuing to be here to share with you. Thank you.
Carl Jones, citizen. I just get tired of complaints. Anybody doesn't know, if y'all want to come help me and my wife clean up Lompoc, we do it all the time. Okay, Make a Difference Day, come in October. We're going to have multiple projects around the city pulling weeds. Okay? It's out there. There's stuff that needs to be done. Lots of volunteer time. I drive around all the time. I see the Lompoc guys out there busting their butts. I see the law enforcement out there busting their butts. I hear the fire department all day long busting their butts. Okay? You want to help stop crime? Get your neighbors out on the streets. Get out in your yards. Criminals don't like to be seen. If you're in your front yard, you can see them. They'll go away. Plain and simple. Okay? We volunteer all the time, pulling weeds. You know, some of it encroaches on city property, but we still do it. Okay? It's called volunteer. Take care of your city. But to come here and just always put it on to city council and urban forestry, nah, we got a city here. Let's get involved. Instead of come up here and complaining every freaking damn council meeting, let's try getting involved. Okay? I can't tell you how many times me and my wife are out there cleaning stuff up, and I see people come by and laugh at us, but we still go out and do it. There are people that come and thank us. Okay? We helped out the Arts Center the other day, pulling weeds. Yeah, we continued on to the park because it needed to be done. Wasn't hard. We spent like an hour, just a little time. You know, you see something need to be done, hey, do it. Grab a pack of seeds, pour it in a pot. Guess what? That dang marine layer comes in every day, we'll water them, and they'll grow. And I'm sure the city ain't gonna really care, as long as they ain't some marijuana. But, you know, I'm just saying, instead of coming up all the time complaining, I'd like to see y'all out there with us. Okay? Like I said, Make a Difference Day, I know there can be at least 2 big projects coming up in October. And there's many other projects. You know, you can look up people on Facebook that are out there cleaning up. I know a gentleman just went over here recently and did some plantings over on H Street. He did it on his own time, spent his own money, just to make the city look better. But he didn't complain. He got involved, went out, got something done. If you want the criminals off your street, get out in the street. Get your neighbors out in the street. Get out in your front yards. Stay out of your backyards. Get off your freaking television, your cell phones, and look at them. Look at dead in the eye, and they'll go away. I guarantee it. I'm always out front, and people, them bums, they just keep on going. They don't stop. That's how you get rid of them. Thank you.
I know the phone's been ringing, so go ahead and put the callers through, please.
Good evening. You're live in the Lompoc City Council meeting. You have 3 minutes to give your public comment. Please go ahead.
Hello. My name is Terry Doutney. I'm
Terry, I'm sorry. Can you please turn off your TV in the background or turn it down?
sorry, I was late on the bus. Yeah. I just wanted to call and thank our city council for their service. I met Janelle, our mayor, and Jeremy Ball at Old Town Market this last weekend, and it was nice seeing them interacting with the community and just getting feedback. It was wonderful. And I don't know. Main reason for my call, police department. I have a property over near the middle school in Ryan Park, and it has been a nice, quiet community, but apparently some bad element has moved in, and tenants are getting harassed in the middle of the night. Vehicles are being vandalized. We just passed this new tax. I know you're hiring people. I know you're trying real hard, but we really need some help in this city. And thank you for your service, and thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Was that the only caller? Okay, thank you. Did we have any written communications?
Yes, ma'am. There was an email that received from Ron Fink. It was provided to council, placed outside in the lobby, and put on the website for all.
All right, thank you. Seeing no one else call in and no additional individuals rise to the podium, we will close general oral communications and bring it back to the agenda. Item number 4, adoption of urgency ordinance number 1697-22, amending Lompoc Municipal Code 13.04.060 to prohibit the use of potable water for the irrigation of non-functional turf at commercial, industrial, and institutional sites, and to clarify that administrative enforcement of prohibitions and restrictions on the use of water is authorized. And we have our utility conservation coordinator, Stephen Vallier, to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, City Council, Mayor Osborne, and Lompoc community members. My name is Stephen Valle. I'm the Utility Conservation Coordinator for the City of Lompoc. And I'm here to present and review the city's annual water shortage assessment submitted to the California Department of Water Resources earlier this year, as well as propose an ordinance which will align the City of Lompoc's municipal code with the state's water code and clarifies the city's enforcement method for code violations related to water wasting. So Executive Order N-722, which was issued March 28, 2022, called for the submission, or called on urban water retailers, water retail suppliers, sorry, a little nervous, to submit a preliminary annual water supply and demand assessment ahead of, or on top of the normal annual supply assessment. Also for the adoption of level 2 water shortage measures, ensuing a 20% reduction from projected available water supplies, as well as the adoption of statewide emergency regulations banning the irrigation of non-functional turf using potable water resources. And that's where Emergency Regulation 2022-060603E became effective through the Office of Administrative Law. I believe it was June 10th, 2022. So that emergency regulation did put in effect the ban of the irrigation of non-functional turf with potable water in commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors throughout the state, meaning that you can't use potable water to irrigate any decorative turf, and it doesn't affect parks, doesn't affect anything considered functional. So to go into the water demand and present the annual annual water supply and demand assessment, we're estimated to have a demand of 4,171 acre feet in this next fiscal year. And as for the supplies, we're estimated to have at least the same amount of supplies as last year, which is 5,089 acre feet through all of our groundwater wells. So if you can see on the chart, the city is predicted to be in a surplus every month throughout this year of water supplies. And if you look at the months, it's a couple of them come pretty close, but that's just due to the fact that some of the dates that correspond with the billing data that we use and the groundwater pumping don't align. So it's a little more stagnant, a little more flatlined than what it shows. So the city implemented locally appropriate level 1 and 2 water shortage response actions since 1990 and continues to do so, even though there's no water shortage in Lompoc. We estimate water demand has been reduced by approximately 917 acre feet annually due to these actions. And if you look on the screen, you can see the actions that we currently uptake in the water or in the utility department. So we provide rebates on plumbing fixtures and devices. We have expanded our public information campaign, so we continue to give out public information on water conservation, and we also have increased water wasting patrols. It isn't exactly what it sounds like. We're not out walking around and looking at who's using water, but we're looking on computers and trying to reach out, help customers understand their water use and find and fix leaks. So the city is in a 22% supply surplus, which exceeds the standard water shortage contingency plan level 2 requirement that was mandated by the state in June. So this exceeds the standard water shortage contingency plan level 2 requirement and is within the city of Lompoc's level 2. So if you look on the board as well, our water shortage contingency plan is a little different than a standard plan. We do have a water shortage crosswalk. So our level 2 actually meets the standard water shortage contingency plan level 3, and we won't have to go through any further actions until a shortage level 4 is required from the state, or if it's deemed necessary by staff based on water supply conditions. So the amendments proposed in ordinance number 1697-22 bans the use of potable water to irrigate any non-functional turf in the commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors. Non-functional turf is a ground cover surface of mowed grass that is ornamental and not otherwise used for human recreation purposes. It does not include school fields, sports fields, or areas regularly used for civic and community events. So it's essentially anything that's just decorative. Things in front of commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors. So the Department of Water Resources is also very relaxed on this. It is something that if you use one patch of grass for an annual barbecue cookout, you're good to go. You're able to irrigate it, keep that going. So, and considering we aren't in a water shortage, it is something that we conservation is definitely of the utmost importance, but it's also something that if not to put any sticks on residents. So so the ordinance would include the addition to align the state's the state's water code with align our water code with the state's water code. And it would also clarify the enforcement language, because currently it only reads under the Water Wasting Code 1304060 that any violations are an infraction. And we would like to add, and just to clarify, that an administrative citation or administrative penalties pursuant to Chapter 136 would be feasible for any water wasting violations, not just this violation. So that's really all I have, or all the information I have on this item, but I'm here to answer any questions, comments, concerns. Thank you.
Councilmember Ball.
So it sounds like, imagine there's going to be a lot of barbecue cookouts throughout Lompoc. But aside from that, something I noticed in here, and it looks like we're ahead of the game a little bit compared to a lot of places dealing with severe shortages. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to brag a little bit and talk about our history of conservation here and what kind of job we're doing in terms of conservation.
Yeah, so I actually started here with the city in 2019. Late 2019, early 2020, and my job's been pretty easy. You guys don't have to cut. We have been, the city of Lompoc has historically been really great in conserving water. A lot of residents I talk to are really knowledgeable about common practices. We've had, like I said, our water wasting restrictions since 1990, and we continue to keep them up. We work perfectly. I mean, with the community, we've set up processes, protocols to try to find water wasting that our community members as well as the city wouldn't want to have around. Water leaks, irrigation systems that are going off of their normally set schedules or things like that. And yeah, I mean, Lompoc community members are really, really great with conserving water. We use anywhere from, I've seen 54 gallons per person per day to on a monthly average of 80 or so. So that's a great mark as compared to other areas. So I think, yeah, we're doing a great job. We're trying to keep it up, use water as efficiently as possible, get education out there on common water conservation tips and practices. And really, I think in the long term, it's trying to change the culture of water use. So it's, for instance, we leave water. How many people leave the water on when you're turning on the shower just to get it warm? I do, but it's something where you turn it off or you put a bucket in the shower. Things like that to reuse that water, use it for irrigation. Brushing teeth. It's common items. I mean, and this ordinance also does not affect trees or other perennial plants. So anything that is drought tolerant, this doesn't affect that. It just affects your common mowed grass. So that's and that is something. I mean, the typical grass that you see in your home isn't really something that is native. It's not native to our area, and it was brought here a while ago. It's been kept up, and it might be time to rethink it a little differently, or think of landscapes a little differently, or the use thereof. So, yeah, but yeah.
Thank you for that. So to be clear, on this specific thing, it does two things. It brings us into alignment with what the state is requiring us to update our
Yes.
code. And the number two, just to be very clear so no one gets confused out there, this does not apply to residences.
No, not to residential lawns. The state has not given any direction to residential lawns.
So before anyone stresses out and thinks that the city council told you couldn't water your lawn, that is not the truth. This is a state thing that they want to force on a lot of businesses to, I guess they want them to have more barbecue cookouts, which I guess makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
More usable lawns.
Appreciate it.
Councilmember Cordova.
For clarification, though, I want to make sure I understand this, that even with our amazing accomplishments of not meeting, I guess, those, or not reaching those thresholds of dangerously low, levels, we are still held, though, to the same cutback goals that the state brings down. So even though we're not in any way yet in a dangerously low level, we're still held to the required cutbacks, though, right?
Exactly. So if we weren't doing as good as we were, this meeting would be a little different. We'd be required or need to add some measures from our water shortage contingency plan. But yeah, this is something we are expected to at least provide the education to customers as a water supplier on this ban. It's a statewide ban. It is not clear that we need to enforce it, and I don't believe we need to. But it is something that we are expected to provide the information and align with. So yeah, but.
And for clarification as well, so when we talk about commercial businesses, and let's say somebody has, for curb appeal, grass in the front of their business, so they would not be able to turn on their sprinklers anymore?
That is correct if they were to follow this, and they also there is an exemption process that aligns with the Model Water Efficiency Land Ordinance. MWELO for short, so there is an exemption process for that, for those that are watering efficiently. Or I think the main point of this is to ensure that we are using our lawns, our water efficiently, and if lawns are being used, that it's not a and water suppliers are showing the data that we are not in a dire shortage right now, that you are able to use your lawn, and it's something I think in other areas taken more seriously. Over here, it's more about education, talking to residents, and yeah, I mean, you are able to, or you would not be able to water grass for curb appeal unless you're doing it efficiently.
So understood. We understand the reasons why we have to do this. So I just want to make sure by us changing the code, though, that there's enough time notification, or even if the city wants to consider in some way a plan for businesses to replace that lawn into something that's more drought tolerant. I don't know. I feel like we should be having that discussion too, because by putting in by changing the code, we're affecting businesses that currently have right now grass in their frontage or in other areas. And so how much time do we give them before we tell them, hey, you can't water that grass, and now it becomes an expense for them to try and figure out, well, I gotta do something about that.
Yeah, and I agree. We do have our landscape rebate program, so up to $1,000. Any water utility customer is eligible to apply for that, and they qualify for the maximum rebate as long as they spend over $1,000 on removing and replacing the turf with drought-tolerant materials, and they remove at least 500 square feet of grass or their lawn. But yes, we are planning after this to get some education. I think the first portion is trying to use our resources and target the commercial, industrial, and institutional customers with education and with the proper means or technical assistance to be able to make this transition, or figure what they need to do to comply. But it isn't something, we haven't given any administrative citations, any violations since I've been here, and I believe it was years before then that we did, sometime around 2016, 17, I believe was the last time we gave out a violation, and it isn't something that we're really running to at all. It's more of a education, have this built into our code just to align with the state, and show that we are, even though we are not in a water shortage, we are doing something to further conserve.
And I guess that's where I'm getting a little confused, because the staff report does say that the proposed ordinance is an urgency ordinance that will take effect immediately without requiring a second reading. And so by us voting this in today, then we would potentially not even be giving any further notice to our commercial establishments that they can't water their lawn anymore. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the new ordinance would say you're not allowed to water it anymore. Mm-hmm. But then we're saying, but we're above the water level. and so it's really just to comply with the code. So I just want to make sure that we're clear and that businesses know, because I can think of quite a few businesses that have grass in front or around their business that if they can't water it anymore, then they have to consider the cost of that. And I think it's fair that why the urgency for us to do this without a second reading or without proper notification to those that are affected by this?
Definitely, I understand. And this was, that's how it was passed as an emergency regulation, so that's why it was drafted like this. We can definitely revisit this at a later time and get some outreach, have some outreach for the community members beforehand on this. So maybe, this room would look a little different if we do that. However, I don't see an issue with it, just because the plan really from here is education. So that's kind of the main focus, is to get the education out to customers, let them know what has changed in our code. It's not more of a stick, it's kind of the carrot approach, where we're trying to help our customers understand their water use, just reach out to them, and really that's what our utility department does pretty much every day, is try to help with technical assistance to use water efficiently. More often than not, it's the customers calling us about water use and their water bills. So but we're definitely up to
Maybe I'm the only one that's not understanding this.
So I think what I'm hearing is that because the state put it in as an emergency ordinance,
Yes.
it's an emergency ordinance for us to come into alignment with the state.
Yes, most local water suppliers have already put
And
this
most of our local communities around us have already instituted it. And then the second part is what you're saying is, because we're not meeting the reasoning for the emergency ordinance because of us already conserving water, you're not rushing to impose this. You're starting out as an education program so that if you do start to see an impact, hopefully we'll have enough people understanding what they need to do to reduce the impact if we do start to see that water conservation drop.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
And then the last part I'm hearing, which I think is the bigger part, is that we need to educate our commercial sites and industrial institutional sites and our landscapers about the landscape rebate program.
Yes, definitely.
Because there's an opportunity that we should be promoting as well. So I guess what I'm understanding is that in order to meet the state's mandates, we're moving forward on our emergency ordinance to match it. But because we are locally not affected as strongly by the drought because of our excess, we are not imposing it as aggressively as we might if we were already at a lower level of water.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So other water suppliers are already, they have it in their code and they're giving out.
But if we get that way, this is already in place and we can be more aggressive, but the goal is not to be that, but to educate and help people transition away from those lawns if they'd like to, and make sure they have the resources available through the rebate program.
Exactly, yeah. This is the addition into the code is just a formality to basically align with the state and show, prove to the state that we are doing something, even though we are not in a water shortage. But long-term, the water conservation is important, so.
Okay. Councilmember Cordova, and then I'll go to Ball.
So thank you for the clarification, because none of that is actually on the staff report. I understand, and that's why I'm glad that it's on the record and it's there for clarification, because I think it's fair to the people that it's going to affect, that they understand that this is something that we're standing up for the sake of complying with the state. However, we're saying in the staff report that it's going to be punishable by administrative citation and infractions. So I'm glad that it's going on record, at least, that we are going to do an educational component and that we are going to explain to our businesses that are being affected by this that there is time and that they won't be charged administrative fines immediately or citations.
Yes.
Councilmember Ball.
So again, you were very open about talking about, you even suggested that there is a lot of leeway, there's a lot of flexibility, a lot in the exemption process. As you go through your education process, will you be helping some of those folks understand the the breadth of options that they have, and that if there is some sort of exemption that they qualify for, you'll help them understand that?
Yes, of course. We're looking, I mean, the MWELO guidance, we would like to help customers water their lawns more efficiently, or try to do so. The kind of typical spray irrigation isn't really the most effective anymore, and that's more common than not in a lot of areas. So, you know, talking about those kind of things, or you know, what they can do to water more efficiently. I mean, we're also going to have to consider all of the municipal facilities as well. So we'll be looking at everywhere. I know a few that would get affected. Our own water treatment plant, the library. So looking at what we can do to make these places functional turf is also what, you know, a consideration. I personally think long term, you know, people with lawns should look at replacing it eventually. I know that our $1,000 rebate doesn't really cover the cost for a lot of that, especially in the commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors. But yeah, we are definitely here for technical assistance. That's really what our water conservation program focuses on, is technical assistance. And with irrigation and leaks, that's our two main subjects with water conservation. Those are the ones that really increase a customer's bill, especially when there's leaks in either or leaks in, you know, within buildings or in the irrigation systems. So yeah, we're trying to help as much as possible. The portion about the administrative citation is more, I mean, it is really necessary, but it's something to clarify just so that we have it into our code. We are already allowed to use the administrative citation process, but it isn't clear in our code, so we would like that clear in case later down the road that, you know, were to ever come up. Yeah. So.
I appreciate your answers and being very open about this. I would just submit back to the water folks that trust us. The people up here are going to be the first people to hear about a administrative citation passed on to a business, because I know they'll get a hold of us. So anyway, just do our best to educate. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I find this whole thing a little ironic. If you receive a utility bill in the city of Lompoc, that makes you a part owner in the utility. It's your water, it's your electricity, wastewater, etc. So when you own it, it improves your utility if you are able to sell water, electricity, etc. So here we are with thousands of people that own a utility that are being told not to use it. And on top of that, we take money out of the utility to pay to use less. It's kind of a funny twist, isn't it, that we have excess water and we're own a utility with thousands of owners, and yet we're being told not to use it. It's like being in business but not selling anything at your business.
Definitely understood. Thank you for your comment. And I do agree. It is something that is a little back and forth. However, this is more of an efficiency kind of item. Also understanding, and just for the public too, agriculture pumps about 70% of the water out of the Lompoc Plain Basin. So, we don't use too much. We are, like I said, a very efficient town with our water use.
If you're going to use agriculture as an example, why don't we use our source of Kachuma? How many acre feet of water just evaporates? Probably equal to what we use here. So you want us to conserve, but we are going to go ahead and make clouds up at Kachuma. We're not restricting. We're the fourth biggest water user in this valley. Fourth. The whole city is in entirety is the fourth largest user. There are 3 bigger users than the city. So it's funny that the citizens and the people that own the utility are being asked to cut back, but we're not doing anything to prevent evaporation where we could feed that into our aquifers. We're not saying don't farm this because I get it. This is well beyond our control. This is a state thing, but once again, it's not Lompoc's problem. We don't have a problem.
Definitely. And, you know, I think this, you know, with respect to your comment, it is more of a, you know, continuity of the water utility issue. You know, long term, you know, personally, I have a 6-month-old baby. I hope her kids and her grandkids have water in the Lompoc Valley. And, you know, it is the driest year in the past 128 years in California. So, you know, if you've been to Kachuma in a while, you haven't been able to take out your boat or to, you know, to do much with it. So, you know, it is something that where, you know, it's more of a long-term strategy, and like I had previously mentioned, more of a, you know, culture. You know, the way we do use water, typically in a home, or typically in a business. You know, it's something we should try to do our part. You know, try to do our best to, you know, to continue to keep water resources available. But you know, it's definitely agreeable to say that, you know, we're not in a water shortage, and you know, we shouldn't be held to the same standards as other areas of California, because there are some areas that are in pretty dire circumstances.
Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, just pointed out, I respect Councilmember Starbuck's comments about ownership of the utility and so forth, but again, looking at Lake Mead and the Colorado River and history and farmers' almanacs, and we're in a, maybe not we, but we are in the state of California. We are dealing with, I don't know what the word would be, but critical mass has been reached in several areas when it comes to water shortages. So again, I appreciate your comments. I also have a very young child, and I'm just hopeful that we can maintain us being a little bit better than most of our neighbors when it comes to water.
All right, seeing no more questions for staff, we will open the floor for public comment. If you would like to speak on this matter, you may come to the podium and you have 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201, 805-875-8201. The floor is yours.
Deb Andrews, Lompoc. I first want to thank staff, very knowledgeable, professional, up to speed on this issue. However, I would ask that you tell the state, no, this is central planning. This does not apply to Lompoc's concerns. Lompoc has plenty of water. Central planning is an integral component of communism. That's what this is. That does not apply to us. We don't need this directive from the state. Tell the state no. This is unconstitutional. We do not comply. Stand up. Stand up for Lompoc. Stand up for the citizens. This is another opportunity to restrict water usage for this area. And I keep noticing it more and more. We don't have any water in our river. Old timers tell me they used to fish in that river and catch big fish. What is going on? This is another opportunity to eliminate businesses from Lompoc. It's just too difficult. Too many rules and regulations. Just make it stop. You have the power to do that. I understand staff is doing their job well. Do your job well. Represent the citizens, represent the businesses in Lompoc. Thank you.
Did we have any written communication on this item?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Thank you. Seeing no calls and no one else rise, we'll bring it back to council, and I will either entertain discussion or a motion. Councilmember Ball.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 1697 parentheses 22.
All right. Councilmember Cordova.
So I just want to say that although I fully understand the need and the requirement for the change in the code, the preservation need as well as the compliance requirement, I'm going to vote against this because I disagree with our approach and our plan for the execution of this code revision. I think the Lompoc Municipal Code is riddled with codes that we do not enforce and that we do not use. So I think writing another one into the code book is a failure on our part. I think that this could have been handled much better and planned much better. So,
Any more discussion? All right, I will give it the second that it needs in order to move forward, and let's vote. So this fails because it required not just that it's a 2-3, but that it required a 4/5 to pass. So we are not in compliance with the state code, and I'm looking for a motion to bring it back in order to meet that. Councilmember Cordova?
can we modify then, so that it gives a time frame for education? So we, in other words, we know that we have to accept this because it's a state regulation or it's a state requirement, but can we modify our approach then to show that there is going to be time on administrative or punishable citations and such, and the educational component, because that's just not, it's missing from the staff report.
Yes, we can bring back a revised ordinance that has like a period before enforcement will take place, and that can be written into the code. We could bring that back for council consideration. Is that what you mean, a period?
Yeah, so it's just so
where
that.
enforcement will not take place until after that certain period?
Correct.
Okay.
So that, or at least that the administrative or punishable citations and stuff, like, we're adopting this and we're saying it's immediate, but then we're kind of saying from the podium that we're really not going to enforce it. You know what I mean? So I just think that we need clarification on that. So if we could give it a time frame, because if we're enacting it, it's because it's a requirement for us to do so.
Does that need to come back, or can that addition be made tonight?
Well, it probably needs to come back because if we're not going to have the ordinance go into effect immediately, then it's no longer an urgency ordinance. And so we need to redraft it as a regular ordinance for a first and second reading. So it would need to come back.
All right. And do you want to come back with a recommendation of time frame from staff, or do you want input from us?
I suppose input from you if you have any, or else staff can have a recommended time frame.
Any thoughts? 90 days? 6 months? Councilmember Cordova?
Well, but then where does the urgency fall?
It no longer becomes an urgency ordinance.
We would bring it back as just a regular ordinance then, that takes a first reading and a second reading, and then it would go into effect 30 days after the second
Where
reading.
does that put us as a city in compliance with the state?
Our code would not be aligned with the state's emergency regulation until that ordinance goes into effect.
And what's the exposure there?
There is not exposure there. The state's emergency regulation can act on its own. The state can enforce the emergency regulation. This was just to align our code with the state's emergency regulation. So I don't see any exposure from the short delay.
Councilmember Vega.
If there's no penalty, why are we even adopting this if we have the option of not creating an ordinance? It's not going to have an urgency to it. It's not going to be enforceable. We don't really even need to adopt this. You know, everybody's scared of the state, and there's a fear factor. You yourself, Jeff, said there's no penalty. So we actually could just continue on because we're not in a state of water rationing. Is that correct?
In my opinion, yes. There's nothing in the state's emergency regulation that requires us to adopt these rules. Staff was bringing it forward just to align with the state regulation.
I think, you know, it's just been overstated here that we need to put in a time frame, and I don't think we need that either. Okay, we're over here 30, 60, and 90 days. Why even address it? You know what I mean? So I'm just asking a question. If we can just continue on until there is some sort of a water urgency here that is enforceable, that we have to do some sort of rationing. I think that we're adopting something that doesn't need to be adopted.
Well, I think waiting till we are in trouble with water is not necessarily the best thought forward. We are very lucky that unlike surrounding areas of the state, we locally don't have a water issue, but we do have a water issue as a city because we own hydro facilities in Northern California that produce our electrical power, and they are impacted by the lack of water and our reservoirs not having the appropriate water levels in it. So there are things that are affected by our choice to act, like because the rest of the state and other areas are having a very high drought, that it somehow locally we don't need to do anything. So I think there is a danger to say waiting till we have a problem to address it when it comes to water is potentially dangerous. So I don't know that I agree with let's ignore it and not worry about it. I think having it and bringing it back and having an honest conversation about how do we maintain our excess? And is this a good way to maintain it by looking at ways to conserve it, even though we own it, it's our water and it's healthy, we ought to still want to keep that healthy level of having our own water rather than worry about waiting until we don't have it and creating that scenario by potentially not doing some of this proactively.
Yeah.
So that would be the only reason to actually have the conversation. We don't need to rush into it, so maybe that's the option,
Right.
is we don't need to
Yeah.
rush into it.
And I, with all due respect, we're taking care of Lompoc here, and we've always had an aquifer that's been ahead of everyone, where we haven't, fortunately, we have a really good aquifer here, and we haven't run into that kind of rationing because Lompoc is in a bowl, and Councilman Starbuck, you also know that also. So I just don't understand that. The fear factor and the danger, it doesn't exist. It's just if you want to be compliant with state is why we would adopt this, and we don't need to be. So that's kind of my statement. I don't think we need to even adopt anything right now. That we're not in a water rationing situation. You heard the consultant, you heard the actual conservation expert. We're in good shape. Just to be in compliance with, and we don't have a penalty, I mean, why do it? Just because the state says that we need to be in compliance, or because of our utilities down the way in California or something are going to be affected in some other city. Let's take care of Lompoc. You know, it's already confusing. You guys have already overspoken and spoken a lot, and actually needed it explained and re-explained on the fact that we're adopting an urgency ordinance, but there's no enforcement because we're not there. You know, it just seems like a waste of time.
Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, I would just for perspective, someone mentioned that there was years ago where the river ran and people fished the big fish and ran all the way to the ocean. So it may not bite us in the butt this year or 5 years or 10 years, but having dove into a lot of the water issues that we have right now, wells are shorter and less around us than they have been in some time. So it's a matter of time that this will come and sneak up on us. But if you'd like to wait till then, I totally respect the council's wishes. My only thought on of adding a time period or not, because it was already suggested that they're really not planning on enforcing anything. If we do add a time limit and that time limit expires, is that then the green light to go and start passing out fines? So that's my only comment.
Councilmember Cordova.
So again, I am not against the conservation effort. I do support that. I will propose and agree to a time frame. So if it's not then an emergency situation that Lompoc needs to adopt today and write it into a code today that we are not going to enforce, but yet at any given point in time, somebody could change hats in our division and decide to go cite everyone and everybody. I mean, we immediately put everybody that is in this into non-compliance by writing this code in. So I have a problem with that. So if we could consider then to bring it back with a well thought out plan, a 6-month, I think gives it enough time for it to be brought back and discussed again. And I also am not of the mindset to kick it down until the day that we do need to ration, and then we could have potentially saved a lot of water at that time. So anyway, I'm in favor of that.
Okay, so your motion is to bring it back as a regular ordinance with regular reading process with potentially a 6-month education period. Okay, I will give you a second. on that request. And any other additional clarification to the motion before we take a vote? Okay, let's vote. And that passes 4-1. Thank you so very much. All right. Item number 5, consideration of solid waste rate adjustments, schedule and notice a public hearing for September 20th, 2022 for proposed solid waste rate adjustments in accordance with Proposition 218. And we have Christy Donnelly, our Management Service Director, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, members of the public, and city staff. So we're here tonight to request direction from City Council to hold a public hearing on September 20th to discuss solid waste rate increases. We request authorization tonight to notice the public regarding this public hearing in accordance with Proposition 218. Let me just start with stating the obvious. This is a difficult discussion, and nobody likes rate increases, including myself. What I do like is ensuring that the city and its enterprises can sustain themselves long-term. And so because of that, it's prudent for us to evaluate costs and rates in order to ensure we are healthy financially. So this cost of service and rate study began several years ago and increased its momentum in the past 9 months or so. Finance department, solid waste department, and our consultant has been working diligently. We want to make sure that we have accurate inputs into the model in order to be able to make sure that we have reasonable outputs and reasonable results. So our consultant, Dave Davis, and his company, MSW Consulting, has been doing solid waste consulting for 30 years now, and he's worked on Lompoc solid waste rate studies since 2001. So I'd like to invite Dave Davis from MSW Consultants now. He's going to do a presentation to go over the study and the results, and then afterwards he, myself, Keith, and Bob will be available for questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I am Dave Davis, as Ms. Donnelly mentioned, the president of MSW Consultants. We're a solid waste consulting firm located in Riverside County. We only work on solid waste. We only work for local governments to avoid any conflict of interest. And in the past 20 years, we've provided service to 80 local governments related to finance, economics, and public policy and regulatory compliance. So tonight I'm going to be presenting the findings and recommendations from our cost of service study. And that report is attached to your agenda item tonight. And to do that, I'm going to talk about, just provide some background information about how solid waste are charged, talk about some of the factors that are driving the cost increases, talk about our approach to the study and how we accomplished it, and then we're going to take a look at a big picture and small picture, so kind of a macro and a micro analysis. We're going to look at the projected operating results of the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund over time, and then on the micro basis, we're going to show how this impacts individual ratepayers, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about comparisons to rates in other cities. So as you know, the solid waste operations are like a business in the city. So there's a separate solid waste enterprise fund where the expenditures for solid waste operations are separately tracked. And then also the revenue to the solid waste enterprise fund comes from the rates that are paid by the ratepayers. And in that enterprise fund, it's divided into two operations, collection operations and landfill operations. And the rates that are charged to collection customers are governed by a part of the state constitution called Prop 218. And that requires that there be a nexus between the cost that is incurred to provide the service and the rates that are charged. And Prop 218 also requires that when those rates are increased, that the local jurisdiction go through something called a majority protest. And that's why we're here tonight. And what is required is that the residents and people that are paying the rates be provided 45 days notice of the increase, and that the local body set a public hearing so that people can come and provide input. And as long as there's not a 50% majority protest, and as long as the council approves the rates, then only then can the rates go forward. And then how the rates are charged, it's based on the size and number of refuse containers and the frequency of service. So there's separate rates for residential and then for commercial and multifamily. And then in the rates, recycling and organics are included. And then just to talk a little bit about the general approach is we take the city's financial statements and we prepare a rate model that mirrors the financial behavior of the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. And we allocate between collection and landfill. We individually project out over 5 years all the individual expenditure categories in the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. And then we compare the revenue to the expenses. Based on that comparison, we make decisions about what rates to project. And then some of the factors that are driving the cost increases, some of them are statewide, some of them are more local to Lompoc. So some of the statewide factors, the biggest one is something that I think the council is familiar with from previous presentations, is SB 1383. We've also put some expenditures in there for vehicle replacement funding, also some funding of the next phase of the solid waste operations, which has to do with the end of the useful life of the landfill. And then also something that you're familiar with at a meeting earlier this year that was discussed is the stormwater infrastructure requirement at the Lompoc landfill. So to start off, SB 1383 is the most significant change in solid waste regulations in the state of California in the last 30 years, since AB 939 was passed in 1989. And the goal is to reduce methane emissions. And the reason why they're trying to keep organics out of the landfill is because when organic material is landfilled and it's deprived of oxygen, it decomposes and turns into methane and escapes into the atmosphere and traps heat in the atmosphere. So to prevent that from happening, SB 1383 requires all cities in the state to mandate organics recycling. And it's important to remember that organics is not just green waste and food waste. Organics is also paper and cardboard, because those things are carbon-based and they are organic and they will break down and convert into methane. So it's not just the green container, it's also the recycling container that the state is requiring every customer to participate in recycling. And the residential sector is already recycling because they're automatically provided a green waste cart and a recycling cart. And this impacts the commercial sector because probably only a third or half of the customers right now are recycling. And what SB 1383 requires is that the city itself create enforcement mechanisms, and that's why I think you recently passed an ordinance to provide the city with the enforcement mechanism to eventually establish fines for people that are commercial customers that don't recycle. And there's a lot of other administrative things that go with it, because as more people recycle, there's going to be more of a problem with contamination. So there's a whole protocol for contamination monitoring, compliance reviews, reporting. And then the other thing that is a big part of SB 1383 is recovering edible food. So there's a lot of edible food that's still good for human consumption, that now goes into the landfill, and that's being targeted as well. And then also it requires that cities procure a certain amount of organic content products. So as you know, this is an unfunded mandate, and the state is very serious about this. And for cities that don't comply, there's a sliding scale of fines And the most severe fine is like a $10,000 a day for somebody that's, or for a local jurisdiction that is just totally recalcitrant. But along the way, there are lesser fines for cities that don't comply. The other thing that we put in the model, this is more local to Lompoc now, so what we put in the model when we projected the expenditures is we put some proactive funding in two areas. One is for vehicle replacements, so we put about $1.25 million in probably the last 3 or 4 years of the model to prepay for approximately 4 route vehicles. And then we also put in about $2.4 million, about $800,000 a year for the last 3 years in the planning period. And that is to fund what we call the next phase of waste operations. So the Lompoc landfill has right now about 10 or 15 years of useful life. And when it comes to the end of that useful life, when it's completely full, the city's going to have 3 choices. One is they're going to have to expand the landfill, and that's going to take a certain amount of capital expenditures, and we don't know what that is at this point, but it's usually pretty significant. The other choice is that it just allow the landfill to not accept waste anymore and build a transfer station and have the transfer station be used to transload, so the route vehicles that carry about 8 tons a load will dump their loads at the transfer station to be loaded onto a transfer trailer that can hold about 22 tons, and it's just a more efficient way to transport waste a more greater distance. So one of the options is to construct a transfer station where route vehicles would transfer the loads for transshipment to the Santa Maria landfill. And then also the option is they could just direct haul, so you could actually not have a transfer station, allow the landfill to be closed, and just rather than having your trucks going right next door to your Lompoc landfill, travel up to the Santa Maria landfill, which probably at that time, it'll be at a location called the Los Flores facility off the 101. So it won't be quite as far as where the Santa Maria landfill is located now, but it's still going to be a lot further than where your trucks travel now to offload their loads. So these are some things that we included in the projections just to be proactive and have this enterprise fund be more sustainable over the long haul. The other thing I think you're familiar with is the city received a notice of violation from the Central Coast Water Quality Control Board, and as a result of that, the city is required to mitigate the runoff from the landfill. And this has been discussed for a few years, and the city has been getting quotes and finding out more about it. But essentially, the city is required to construct infrastructure to capture and retain and redirect the runoff at the Lompoc landfill, and not just from the landfill itself, but also from the watershed above the landfill. And at the moment, the current cost estimate is about $5.2 million. We've included $5 million in the cost projections, and we're projecting to finance that so that the debt service in the planning period is really about $1.7 million, but the total cost is going to be about $5.2. So those are the main things that are driving the cost. And what I'm going to talk about now is the projected operating results and financial condition of the enterprise fund. And what this graph does is it kind of shows several things all at once. It shows the operating performance year to year of the enterprise fund, and then it shows the financial condition of the cash reserves and how that changes over time. So the red bars are the operating expenses, and the green bars are the revenue. And then the green line is the operating cash balance. So you see when the red bar is higher than the green bar, you're losing money, and that green line goes down. And the yellow line is the target reserve balance. And the target reserve balance is 25% of your operating costs. And the idea is 25% is about 3 months. So if everything just crashes and burns, you'd still have 3 months to kind of rebuild your system. So a lot of jurisdictions use that as a reasonable reserve balance, that 25%. So what this shows is that without any rate adjustments, if you just leave the rates where they are, and we incur the planned expenditures, the cash reserve is going to fall below the target balance pretty quickly, and the enterprise fund will be completely depleted in fiscal 2024. This shows another picture. This is the same graph if the proposed rates are implemented. And what this shows is that the rates are adjusted and the revenue is increased, and the cash balance stays just above the targeted reserve. And then on the right-hand side of the graph is a measurement called the debt service coverage ratio. So because we're planning to issue debt to pay for the stormwater infrastructure, we need to make sure that in addition to having a cash reserve that exceeds the target balance, we need to have a debt service coverage ratio that exceeds usually about 1.5%. And in this case, the debt service coverage ratio would be adequate for the city to meet its debt covenants. So these are the rates that we're proposing to be adjusted. And the thing that's important to realize here is that in order to identify the nexus between the cost of service and the rates that are charged, we had to realign the rates in the first year. So not every ratepayer and class of ratepayer is getting the same rate adjustment in the very beginning. But then after the first year, then the rates are going to be a standard increase across the board. So the rates that are shown where it says proposed FY 2023, those are the rates that are proposed to be implemented October 1st of this year. And then when it says fiscal 2024, those are the rates that would be implemented on July 1st. So the very first rate adjustment is on October 1st of 2022, and then the rate adjustments thereafter would be on July 1st of the subsequent years. So this shows the rates for the most common levels of residential service. And the 95-gallon container, just for reference, you got about 5,200 customers that subscribe to that 9,500-gallon container, and you've got about 2,800 that subscribe to the 65-gallon container. So these are the single-family proposed rate adjustments. And then what this shows is the multifamily and commercial rates. And what this shows is that the 65-gallon rate, you might be wondering why there's no rate prior to 2023, and that's because we're proposing that we offer a 65-gallon container to commercial customers, and this was not available before. And then also it shows that the 95-gallon commercial rate is going to go up approximately 22.5%. And you might notice that the commercial rates are not going up as much, and that's because we realigned the rates with the cost of service, and we found that the commercial rates, the existing commercial rates, were already quite a bit higher than the cost of service, so they didn't need to have the same level of increase as the other rates. And then after the rates get realigned, you can see that the rate adjustments are across the board in the out years. The other thing that's important to remember about the multifamily rates is right now, the way the multifamily rates are charged is they're charged based on the individual unit. So we have some customers that the multifamily property owner is paying the bill directly to the city, and they're paying it based on the number of units at their property. And you've got about 3,000 of those. And then there's another group of customers that are paying it as a tenant. So they're a tenant, they get a utility bill, and on their utility bill is an individual charge. It's about $24 right now for multifamily solid waste collection. So we're transitioning to a type of rate where people pay for the type of service that they have. So there's a better nexus or a better pricing signal when people in multifamily complexes pay for the size and number of containers that they use, that rather than having the individual unit pay for that service. So for the customers that are tenants that are being charged directly, there'll be a transition period, right? So it'll take a little bit of time probably no longer than 6 months for the utility billing to convert those complexes from individual direct billed customers to billed based on the size and number and frequency of containers. In the meantime, that $24 rate is going to go up about the same percentage that all the other multifamily rates are going to go up, and it's just a transitional charge, and that's going to be about $30, and that's included in the Prop 218 notice. And then at the landfill, we're going to increase, or we're proposing to increase the passenger vehicles from $10 to $15, and then there's a minimum charge for larger vehicles, pickup trucks and things that have up to 500 pounds, and the minimum is going to go from 21 to 25. And then the weighed tonnage, right now it's $82.34. We're proposing to increase that about 9% to $90, and then take that up over time about $4 per ton through fiscal 2027. And in setting the landfill rates, we have to be aware of kind of the market. See, people have a choice if they want to go to Santa Maria or Santa Barbara or someplace else. So we need to set those rates such that if we set them too high, we don't want to push people away from using our landfill. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. The illegal dumping. And then finally, I just want to show that even after these pretty significant rate increases, when we compare the rates, the proposed rates in Lompoc to those in other jurisdictions, the rates are still within reason. So the dark blue bars are the rates for a 60-gallon cart in these other jurisdictions in Santa Barbara County, and the two blue bars, the light blue bar on the left represents the current rate, and the light blue bar in the middle of the graph represents the proposed rate. So for the 60-gallon container, even after the rate adjustment, it's still going to be kind of in the middle of the pack in relation to other jurisdictions. And then this is the same type of analysis for the 90-gallon rate, where the light blue bar on the left is the existing rate, and the light blue bar in the middle of the graph is the proposed rate for a 90-gallon container. And then here's the 450-gallon is comparable to a 2-yard bin. So this shows that even after the rates are adjusted in Lompoc, the commercial rates are still very competitive compared to other jurisdictions in Santa Barbara County. And then this is the comparison of the minimum charge at the landfill. You can see it's going from $21 to $25, and it's still competitive in relation to other landfills in Santa Barbara County. And here's the weighed tons. Shows that we're still competitive. We're a little higher than Santa Maria, but not too much, where I don't think it's going to make people drive further just to save, a few bucks. But this shows that the rates are very competitive in relation to other landfills in Santa Barbara County. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have any of the other surrounding communities raised their rates or in the process because they're impacted by the same state unfunded mandates, and we
Yes.
just haven't seen them yet?
No, we're pretty up to date. Santa
Okay.
Barbara County just raised theirs a few months ago.
Okay.
Santa Barbara's been raising their rates because they're building a resource facility at the Teaquas landfill. Santa Maria raised their rates last year, so these are pretty up to date. I don't think they're going to go up a lot more.
Okay. Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. A couple of the dates you mentioned were 2018. I came in 2020, so I'm curious a little bit about history, and it sounds like you have 21 years of analyzing Lompoc and understanding. I'm just out of curiosity. Look, no one wants to talk about rate increases, and these rates that are being proposed are not insignificant. These are substantial, and a lot of folks here don't have big incomes, so this will be a pretty dramatic impact. What I'm curious about is, maybe from your perspective in hindsight, first off, when's the last time we even made a rate adjustment? And is there a scenario where we could have done a better job of incrementally making adjustments over time to soften the impact that we're about to feel? Or is this just, we had no idea the state was going to mandate everything and that's it?
Yeah, well, what happened is the last time we did this study was 2014. And some significant things happened in 2018. China started banning, accepting recyclables. And that sent a little bit of a shockwave through the industry. And those rates back in, I think there was like a 3.6% increase over 5 years. The first 4 were done, and then the last one was deferred until just this year. So I think, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. I think if we had raised rates more in knowing then what we know now, we probably would have raised more than the 3.6%. But you can remember, like at the time, CPI, you know, I do a lot of rate increases for trash companies, right? And they get a rate increase based on their CPI. You know, from 2005 to 2015 is like, you know, 2%, 3%. CPI was just really low for a long period of time. So that last time we looked at the rates, we were in an environment where we're not now. Now, you know, inflation's, you know, 10% or 9%, things like that. So, like I say, hindsight's always 20/20. And I think that if we knew then what we knew now, we might raise more than the 3.6%.
I appreciate that. One other question. You mentioned the notice of violation, and as I kind of just looked at the rough numbers, the impact of the notice of violation and its the way that it's trickling down, pun intended, that's a significant percentage of the increase is going to go towards that, addressing that notice of violation. I don't know if you have a good answer, but is there anyone that can speak to how we could have avoided that notice of violation? Are there steps we should and were educated that we should have taken in the last few years to avoid that notice of violation? Because at the end of it, our citizens are going to pay the price for us having violating a state requirement.
I know a little bit about that, but there's people here that know a lot more that have been living and breathing that for the long, you know, since 2018. So I'd like to defer to Keith probably. I think he could give you a good answer on that.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Keith Quinlan, Solid Waste. The NOV that came forth from Regional Water had to do with the quality of the water that was exiting the landfill. What we've run into, being in a canyon fill, we're responsible for any water, stormwater that comes onto the landfill. So the hills above the landfill come down, they come onto the landfill, we're responsible for it. Our readings or our numbers were not good for various constituents within the stormwater. That's the reason for the violation, and we have to make improvements so as to improve our constituent numbers or the quality of the stormwater that leaves the site. One of the things we're going to do is try to bypass the stormwater from above the landfill around the landfill and only be responsible for the stormwater that falls on the industrial site or the landfill. So we have to make these improvements, and we would attempted to make various improvements year over year, but they weren't enough, and now we're at the point where we are now, and we have to make these major improvements to the landfill to come into compliance.
I appreciate that. The only reason I'm asking that is I'm just trying to understand, were we surprised by that notice of violation, or did we see it coming and we just couldn't do enough to get ahead of it?
Oh, we tried to do various best management practices at the landfill to make improvements to the stormwater. But because of the canyon site and the way our drainage was set up with on a native soil, if we got a major rainfall, then it would take that soil down the hill. Yeah. So there were improvements made, best management practices year after year, but we're going to now have to do something major.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Councilmember Starbott.
Sounds like we ought to close the landfill and haul everything to Santa Maria.
I don't know if that is, as one thing that was brought up in the presentation is that we're going to have a next phase study to see what the best options are once we do close the landfill. We have approximately 10 to 15 years of capacity left. There is a possibility to expand the landfill. Expansion of the landfill will require a liner collection system, which is not inexpensive, a leachate collection system, and we may be able to get an additional 10 or 15 years of capacity. But that's what our next phase study is going to look at.
Well, we're already over 5 million on just stormwater. I can just imagine how much we could spend on that. I've got a few questions, and I think that they're going to clarify things for people that are paying landfill. But first off, what are our accounts receivable? We've never taken into, how much money is owed solid waste right now?
What do you mean by owed?
Who hasn't paid their bill?
Oh, that would be a finance question.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, if we were owed 2 million, I don't know, what's owed?
So I don't have the numbers as of today. I have what we reported in 2021, and I can get you the numbers for what is owed today tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, a long time has gone, and we've waived collection of utility for
We have been
quite a while.
waiving late fees and disconnections on our utilities, and that is something that we will be bringing back a plan
But
to.
so really, it's an unknown number, and it's something that none of us want to sit up here and guess about or
Right.
bank on, but it could be up to a couple million, you think?
I think that it's probably in the 1 to 2 million range. It may be less. I'm hope that is the case, but people have been delinquent on their bills.
Yeah, that'd be a very important component in this, you know, for later. You know, another scenario that Mr. Ball asked, what was the history of it? You know, in our CAFR in 2018, which 16-17, operating revenues exceeded operating expense by $1 million. Hence why, if we're making $1 million over what we expected, why would we continue to do rate increases? So the 3.6 increase at that time was waived. We say, no, we don't need to impose that on the people because we're $1 million ahead. And that continues on with 19 and 20. You know, we had a $0.7 million, you know, we exceeded operating. You know, the last paper was the one that said that, okay, now we're in a little trouble here, you know, from our 2021. So it led me to go into a little research here that we saw the trend. We were gaining less. We might have wanted to get on this a little sooner. I don't know if the consultant was lagging, if we didn't want to take action here or what it was, but now we're pretty much up against the wall, it appears. Also looking at enterprise reimbursement, one of my favorite subjects, and cost allocation. How much money is leaving solid waste fund for other purposes? Well, I have the answer on cost allocation. It's a tremendous amount, $2.7 million. You will never get away with explaining cost allocation,
So
you know.
the way I look at cost allocation, and I can talk about it at a pretty high level, if this were a private enterprise, which we do run the business, we do run the enterprise as a business, it would have to have accounting, and it would have to have billing, would have legal representation, human resources, and all of those types of services. And so the cost allocation plan is utilizing those services within what's in the general fund and allocating them to the utilities. So that rather than having to the solid waste doesn't have to hire their entire team, it's split between the different utilities.
You're right. But I'm also going to say that out of solid waste, we take $1.2 million and it goes to Treasury. It makes sense. Treasury sends your utility bill.
If you're looking
That's
at
for 2 years.
if I could,
yes.
if you're looking at the cost allocation plan, the way the cost allocation plan works, that is they'll pass out all the money from one division, and then they'll go to the next one, and they'll pass out all their money, and it goes in a big circle. And so if you were to look at, it's not an instantaneous push out. So if you were to look at like finance, which is comprised of budget counting, utility accounting, utility billing, treasury, and purchasing. Last I looked at it, and when we did a presentation on it, in 2000
Every one of those you just mentioned has its own allocation.
yeah, if you look at it, the overall, that division, last time I did a presentation, was around $3.6 million was their charge that that's what they spend. And approximately 14 to 15% of that gets charged to solid waste. So it's kind of confusing when you look at that one because it's dispersing money in a circle, and it could have 8 divisions on top of that when you look at that. So it's very confusing to look at that model. It's more precise when you allocate out. However, if you were to do it instantaneously and see what is the portion that solid waste pays, it's somewhere in the tune of around $600,000 or $700,000 for all of finance to do their division work.
It's
That's
almost,
not counting HR and attorney's fee. Those are all a little different. They
right,
have a
well, I mean,
different
the city
allocation.
council's getting 56,000 out of the fund.
Yeah, like I said, that document is kind of confusing to get
Yeah,
the number of how much
wastewater's
is
kicking in
pushed out.
39,000.
Like-
You know, so yeah, you're right, it's confusing, but it's still the bottom line is 2.7. Wastewater, 2.9.
That 2.7 could be all of HR, the attorney, the city administrators, a lot of stuff
is.
that.
It's
that
a
is-
total.
Yeah, so it's not a good representation to look at to get what the cost is to solid waste. If you were to do it instantaneously, like I said, it's about 14 to 15% is what
Because we look
finance
at,
gets allocated out, because
Yeah.
almost all of utility billing and treasury is 100% pushed out to the utilities.
sure. Well, I mean, the electric utility's putting 4.2 million.
And Mr. Starbuck, I do want to point out that those are over 2 years, those numbers.
Oh, yes, this is over 2 years, so in 1 year, we would be at 1.35 million.
But like I said, that could contain a lot of other
Yeah.
divisions stacked on top of it, so it's not true, to get the correct number, how much solid waste actually pays, it's really not a true measure.
It gives you the impression that we're using the enterprises to augment the general fund is how I see it. And I realize I'm probably looking at it a little narrow-minded here on it also.
Yeah, and I've looked at other allocation methodologies that are more instantaneous, so you could see that reflection of what exactly each utility is paying proportionally. But I did do some work on this, and if
I'm
you
just
want, we-
looking for ways to save money or to
Yeah.
make solid waste less impactful on our bills. We're looking at a huge increase in a couple of years here for something that's going away. There's not a gain on it. We're losing, and we're putting money into it, which is not a good model. Another question is, our enterprise reimbursement, how much are we actually taking out of the solid waste fund? There's really no pedigree of funds for that.
So the solid waste fund currently in 2022 paid approximately $600,000 in the enterprise reimbursement plan.
No, that was all. That was right-of-way, building, public safety, the
Yes.
total out of them. You know, there was $1 million that we came up short, and I don't want to say short, but in between 20 and 2021, approximately $1 million just shifted. Was this because of the purchase all of a sudden of vehicles for solid waste? All of a sudden, we bought new vehicles, and I know that we've separated our vehicle and fleet fund. Am I on the right path with this, that's where that money probably went?
We have to replace vehicles within solid waste pretty regularly, and so.
But we hadn't for a while, and suddenly we purchased, what, 4 trucks?
I believe it was 4, yes.
And we use financing, and one of the things we did, just for the edification, is we separated out the fleet funds from the general government funds and the enterprise funds. We're also in another transition this year to separate all the utilities will have their own vehicles in their own fund. And that's because right now, the way they set it up, their methodology was they would put it in the internal service fund, the fleet fund, which is an internal service fund, which is actually an extension of the governmental funds. To me, that was inappropriate. So that's one of the reasons we're moving it out of the governmental funds, the internal service fund, and putting it in their own fund. So from now on, when they buy vehicles, they will be coming out of solid waste, and the liability will be there along with the asset.
So basically, we're not going to use solid waste to buy a police cruiser.
Yeah, it was.
Things that had happened
I went
in the
back and
past
looked at 10 years, and I did an analysis on how much was going into that fund. The methodology was pretty close. It wasn't material or substantial, but it wasn't precise. And I think the methodology that I wanted to go to, and we have been going over the last 5 years, is going to be more precise.
Yeah, I'm just really tore up with this. I understand it. It just seems like we could have got a year jump on it almost. You know, I'm going to listen to the rest of council.
Councilmember Ball.
Forgive my ignorance here. Just out of curiosity, in past councils making these decisions on budgetary things, have we had a vehicle replacement plan integrated into the basic solid waste program here? Anything?
I don't believe so. I'm going to defer to Dean on that question.
One of the things that we've done in the last budget cycle is we've incorporated into the capital improvement program. And you can see the vehicles ahead of time, what we're pronouncing to buy, instead of just guessing what we're doing. We're trying to be a little bit more transparent, and you can see those in the CIP under the vehicle replacement program.
So I'm just curious, again, bear with me. So when that final 3.6% was deferred, they said, don't worry about that, let's not go another 3.6. At that time, when they deferred that, there was no plan to replace these vehicles.
It was in the, I believe it was in the CIP.
No, I mean, we're talking a couple of years back when.
They would have a better understanding of how much but we buy a lot of side loaders. I mean, Keith can tell you, we probably go through 3-4 a year. I mean, so they go out every, go ahead.
Our current turnaround for refuse side load collection vehicles is a lifespan of 7 years. And with that being said, we have a fleet of approximately 14 with backups and spares. We need to replace vehicles two vehicles every 2 years to be on a regular cycle. So when I started, we were quite behind. There hadn't been vehicles purchased for a number of years, and we had to bring that back up to par.
Do you mind if I ask what year you started?
2014, so I've been here approximately 8 years.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So I think, well, it's important to understand how we got here in order to understand why these rate increases are so large. One of the key parts of the staff report and the presentation has been that we're finally being proactive. We've identified our vehicle needs and factored that into the rate study. We've identified the needs to retrofit that we don't have the funds to finance and move forward on. But this way we would help cover that finance with the adjustment in the rates. And that really long-term vision of what do we do in 10 to 15 years with the facility. And that is another study, but at least we're setting ourselves up to start setting aside a small portion of what is likely to be a very large fund we need to have, no matter our decision on it. And I think that's what the community really needs to hear, is that while this rate adjustment feels very large, we're finally moving towards a model where we're setting ourselves up to be able to afford the investment we need to make to have an ongoing, successful, healthy, solid waste department, instead of this catch-up we're playing from 10 to 20 years of not really planning for these mandated changes, whether we expect them or not, because they're just going to begin to happen. So I know it's difficult. I know it's not an easy pill to swallow. I'm sitting here doing the math on how much mine's going to adjust, and it means different things to different families depending on what it is. But it means that we will have a landfill that is functioning and meets code. It means that we will be able to get the finance because we will have the money to make the payments. And it means that we can set itself up for potential longer life by investing in it appropriately through adjusting these. And I think that's the important part. It's our community. We have to invest in our infrastructure. We have to make sure it continues to be successful, avoids fines, and is functioning on a daily basis, because solid waste, if you don't have your trash picked up, it isn't a pleasant community to live in. If any of you remember any of the photos in the 70s when communities did not have trash being picked up and didn't have the services needed, it does not make for a welcoming community. And we already struggle with trash as it is, and the idea of not having our solid waste department functioning in a healthy manner and able to provide this service is not a good look for us long term. So I think that's the part to focus on, is that the additional rate increase is very purposeful in making sure that we can provide the service to ourselves. We pay ourselves to invest in these services that we all expect. So I know that's difficult. Do we have any more questions for staff before we go to public comment? Councilmember Vega.
Yeah, these are extreme increases, and I get it. It's easy to go back and try and blame another council or another staff, some other staff that were there, but that wasn't where this came from. These state mandates, they're unfunded because it was the state that implemented them. And Dean, maybe you could probably chime in if you could. The state mandates, these are huge unfunded items. It wasn't anybody's fault, really, except for the state imposed that on our landfill. My issue is where the hardship that we're putting here is on the lifespan of the landfill. You know, the investment's going to be, we're going to be making payments beyond the lifespan of the landfill, you know, so I'm wondering, is there anything that we have there? Is there any kind of leeway? Was there any kind of forgiveness? Or are we just stuck? You know, say if the landfill only had a 5-year lifespan, are we still obligated to invest $5 million?
Yeah, I think another thing too that really stalled out the rate study was COVID. I mean, we had such a difficult time communicating with everybody and staff that were not here, and it really slowed things down. I mean, my plan was to do a lot more of the rate studies when I was a management service director, and thank you for getting me caught up. But yeah, and we are kind of stuck with all the mandates. I know our consultant covered a lot of those.
Yeah, and we're stuck with a decision-making process. It's easy to make an excuse and try and say, oh, well, we have to raise the increase the rates here, so let's blame somebody else why we're not there, okay? Sometimes it works, sometimes it does, okay? But we have to play with deal with the cards we have right here. So let's man up and sit here and see what we can do to actually do this instead of trying to lay blame.
Councilmember Cordova.
So I'm not hearing, though, an alternative to what is being proposed by staff, and I'm not here to play the blame game on this at any point in time, but I think any time that we have to face the increases, it's a hard pill to swallow. I don't know, and I'm going to take a different approach, but still in support of what was being said, but I'm going to take a different approach on the fact that we're being proactive. I think we're actually finally having to face the music. I'd love to say that we're being proactive, but in reality, we're having to face the facts. And there's a huge list of reasons why and what has impacted this, and the reason why we're facing these gigantic increases. It's all, you know, multifaceted, because we're looking at like what Councilmember Starbucks said. You know, he pointed out a lot of different items that don't make sense when it comes to our budget and the way that we were allocating money. The fact that we did have prior councils that held rate increases, and you know, at that time it seems like we're doing our residents a favor, but in reality, if as Councilmember Jeremy said, if we're holding rate increases, but we're also not allocating for you proper replacement of vehicles, and we're also not allocating properly the infrastructure needs of our entire operation, then we're actually not really doing you a favor. We're just setting you up for failure in the future. So I just think that we do need to address, however, what Councilmember Vega said in regards to the lifespan of this facility, and whether is there a way, or does it make sense for us to continue to dump money into this when we know that we have to face the fact that this may need to go away within 10 years. So here we are pushing, you know, a rate increase, which I fully understand.
but how do we address the lifespan of it, and why would we want to dump another $5 million into something that could potentially go away, or how quickly do we consider the alternative of how we're going to be handling trash in 15 years, 12 years, 13 years?
That's a good question, and that's what our next phase study will be about. Regardless of whether the landfill closes in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or even longer, we're still responsible for the landfill for perpetuity. The state used to look at it as 30 years. So after you close the landfill, you have a responsibility to that landfill, and we have a closure fund that is a requirement to operate a landfill in California, as all landfills do, for post or closure, after closure, maintenance on the landfill. So that includes the landfill gas collection system, the stormwater systems, and various other regulatory items that we'll have to continue. So the landfill will be with us for a long time, even after it closes. And as far as, there are options to do things with landfills down the road after closure, converting it to a park or things of that nature. They've done that outside of New York City on Staten Island. It's called Fresh Kills Landfill, and it's one of the largest landfills in the world, 3 times the size of the Great Pyramid. That closed many, many moons ago. The 9/11 debris went there in 2001. That landfill was closed. That landfill is now being converted to a park. So there are options down the road. I don't know if that answered your question. I think that I touched on very good.
Well, even closer, Elings Park down in Santa Barbara is the old landfill for Santa Barbara, so it happens. Councilmember Vega and then Councilmember Ball.
Yes, it's for Keith. One more question here, sir. Yes, that addresses one thing, that we have a responsibility to take care of the land, because I understand, is there a reclamation plan that's required also with a landfill? That you have to convert it back to actually growing plants and things like that? Is that what you're referring to, as far as the conversion back to a usable piece of land?
That is part of it, council member. When we do close the landfill, it has to be capped. So there's a process to close a landfill, and you have to put approximately 5 feet of soil on top, and you do have to vegetate it. There is a lot of involvement with that, but then there's ongoing maintenance that has to be looked at beyond that. So 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, you have to make sure the site is still, things didn't open up or the drainage is still happening, and that the methane is being diverted.
The question that Councilwoman Cordova had, though, that was a different answer, though. The fact that we have to maintain a property after its lifespan wasn't the same as having to fund the state mandates during its lifespan. Is that correct?
Well,
that's two different answers there, because yes, you still have to fund all the methane and the maintenance and all that, but I think she was maybe referring to during the lifespan, what are our alternatives, because no one wants to hear the alternatives of, either privatizing or doing something different, because we're always talking about being proactive and having foresight, but nobody wants to talk about having foresight now, okay? Because what we're doing is we're investing in something that what are we going to do, start ramping it down, and then we have a maintenance plan. So when should those conversations start happening, since we're going to be getting in, I don't know how many years debt for this just to be in compliance. So almost we're being blackmailed into being in compliance by the state because of the mandates. But what if a landfill had less than I guess you could close it, right? I mean, if you didn't want to meet the mandates.
You would still have to meet the requirements of the regulatory agencies, whether you close in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years.
Yeah. And I guess that's another question, but still, when you're investing that kind of money, it seems like that should be something, at least, instead of saying, hey, we can buy more land and we can expand and we can put a liner, that's just another way of leading us into something else, you know what I mean, that where we have, have more expenditures.
Possibly. It's, one, you have this, you have a landfill in your backyard, so to speak, and that is kind of it's a good thing to have for the city, you know, to be in charge of its utilities. So it should be looked upon favorably for that. But there are those expenses and those things that you just mentioned, and that's what this, as I mentioned, the next phase study would look at. We're going to look at those options and see what would be best for the ratepayers.
I got you. And I guess my question is, you know, just a little bit of guidance on whether the investment, there's no way out of this investment, correct? I mean, as far as from city managers type, finance, from the legal standpoint, I don't think we have an option here, do we?
Improvements have to be made, so yes, improvements have to be made per the regulatory agency.
Because I heard that there were huge penalties associated with this also, okay? So just want it clear, because since we're going back and we're trying to put the blame on other councils or maybe point the fingers, I want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and the right questions are asked, because politicians, as you know, they're here to sell something, but they have to ask the right questions so the public can pay attention, because I bet you most of the people have turned their TV off by now.
Councilmember Ball.
Well, I promise you they won't put the newspaper down quickly when they read about 50+% increases coming very soon. So again, I appreciate the comments, and if it came across as trying to blame prior councils, I appreciate that. I do know that in the future when I'm out and I'm no longer on council, I will receive lots of blame for choices that I made. My whole point in bringing up history is that as a relatively younger person here, that's looked at some things, we see a cycle where if we had made slightly different choices, if we had done slightly better planning, Councilwoman Cordova has brought up numerous times that if we had only planned ahead for simple things like vehicle replacement and putting monies in buckets, we could lessen the impact, the dramatic impact that our citizens are about to receive. So again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I have no idea how to avoid these massive rate increases. But if we do not appreciate and study and ask questions about our local history, we are absolutely doomed to repeat it. And that's why I bring up these things. I want to know, like, what did we do? Could we have done it better? Don't take it personally. I want us all to make the best, most equitable decisions that we possibly can to lessen this impact. But it is going to be dramatic, and people are going to want to know why. How do we get here? So I want to understand that as well.
Okay. Seeing no further questions for staff or our consultant, we'll close the discussion for now and open it for public comment. If you would like to comment on item 5, you are welcome to come to the podium for 3 minutes, or you may call in at 805-875-8201, 805-875-8201. The floor is now open.
Deb Andrews, Lompoc. There's just a whole lot going on with this discussion. The goal at the beginning of the presentation was to reduce methane gas emissions. It's my understanding, it's been a long time since I've looked at it, but you have equipment to capture the methane gas, which can be used again for other things. So if the goal is to reduce the methane gas emissions, we already have equipment to capture that. Could that be expanded? I don't know if other citizens can understand the issue here. The cost allocation, I think, is a real important issue that perhaps could be tightened up, looked at better. The rate increases are too large. The average person does not get a 50% raise in income at their job. So I don't know if these plans are for another population in another place, but certainly not for Lompoc. I think that bigger picture, things need to be organized, looked at more closely. There's an awful lot of money being spent, being talked about from the dais, and some things never seem to be put in place. And it seems like such a small thing now, but like the time clock for employees that have flexible hours. That's like a no-brainer, but it's just out there. So perhaps things could be tightened up. I don't know.
Did we have a caller? Go ahead and put them through.
Okay, I'm going to transfer you. Good evening, you're live in the Lompoc City Council meeting. You have 3 minutes to give your comment. Please go ahead.
Good morning, council, or good evening, council. I was listening to the financial spot, and my thought exactly was, why aren't we saving up in separate pockets for these expenses that we know are coming up? Why are we always financing them? I like the idea of putting money in a separate pocket for vehicle replacements every year that we know are coming up. And I also like gradual increases as opposed to a 50% jump, which is going to kill everybody. But, again, thank you for your service. Thank you for your forethought. Thank you for taking care of our city. Thanks for your service. Bye.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, did we have any written communication on item 5?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Thank you. All right, seeing no one else rise, we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to council. Councilmember Cordova.
So, you know, in reviewing the proposed percentages of increase for all, whether it be single-family, multifamily, or commercial, the big hits come in year 2023 under the proposed, and then, you know, follow to 2024, and then they seem to kind of like taper down a bit. Is there a way that, since we have the projection of costs and we have the projection of the for both whether it be the landfill or the collection area, is there a way that we can maybe create a better formula in the percentage year over year, rather than have this gigantic increase in the coming year and then have it taper down in 2027 or 2026? Because the way I see it is, in 2027, if we think the cost of doing business right now is huge, imagine what it's going to be 5 years from now. So I don't know if there's a formula that we could still, I guess, meet the numbers for proposed revenues, but just adjust the percentages so that it's not hitting so heavy on year 1 or year 2. I don't know.
Yes.
Councilmember Ball.
So that is something that has my curiosity. I actually really like as well. What I would be curious is, could that be tied to the discussion of, do we extend the life of the landfill, or do we shorten it?
No, because that's a separate study.
Well, I'm just saying, whether we do it officially or not, it should be part of
separate
it.
study. As my understanding, that's going to be its own study with its own evaluation. And this is about things that we have to do no matter what, whether we keep it open or we don't keep it open.
But we have flexibility in how, whether it's 20% over 3 years or it's 15% over 5 years. So why don't we have some
So
flexibility
when you look,
with that?
so just for an example, if you take the first line of the residential at 65 gallon, the first year is at 20%, 2024 is at 20%, 2025 is at 10%, 2026 at 5%, and 2027 is at 5%. So that's a total of nearly 40%.
60%, right?
20%,
10,
10,
5, 5.
5, 5. So 30, 40. So that's 20 and 10 is
Oh, I thought you said
30,
20
and
twice. I'm
30
sorry.
and 5 is another 10. So that one there. So the question is, do you want it to become 10, 10, 10 and 5? I mean, or 10, 10, 10 and 10. I mean, and so the question is, are we looking to flatten it so that it's not this giant jump and then taper off? Do you want to just see it level out so that it's, and it depends on which grouping you're looking at, because that one's the easy one to discuss. So
Maybe-
I
maybe
think
he should elaborate
that's
on
what
yes.
we're looking for, is if that's a
Could
yes.
have commented so there's some constraints here.
Right.
And what we're also trying to do, this sounds a little silly, but we're trying to keep that green line above the yellow line.
Thank you.
So there's all these constraints that we try and
Yeah,
should have
because when you
mentioned
look at the other graphs, there's implications for how you're trying to jump to making sure your debt service is met and how quickly you can meet that versus how long you need.
Right,
get
and
there.
then when you decrease the current years, then you have to increase the out years even more.
Even more, and that's the concern, is that if we make this proposal in the opposite way or we level it out, we might be misconstruing those numbers in a way that isn't healthy.
Yeah,
Or
if you go to the next slide.
next slide, the one with
Yeah.
the adjustments, right?
So, you know, you could do what you're saying, but then you'd get that, you could make that green line dip, you know, close to zero. You know, you could have it go below your targeted balance. So that was one of our constraints, is to keep that above the targeted balance. So, and the targeted balance is something that is kind of an industry thing. You could say, well, I want to keep it above 10% or 5% or, you know, something else, and we can do that.
It sounds like there's a lot of flexibility, so I just would hope that we'd have a wide discussion on what we're absolutely obligated to do, and
But
is
it's
there
not
any other
going to
options?
affect the rate.
Okay.
That's my understanding, is we can choose how quickly we ramp it up or slow it down, but it's not going to change these rates. These rates need to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the only confusion from my side is like, do we do 20% just that year, it just goes up that much? Or is it was 10% over a couple more years, I guess? If that's not possible, then I have more to learn.
Okay. Councilmember Cordova.
I'll let.
Okay.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
I didn't
I
see
do
his
have
light.
something
Go
I
ahead.
want to
That's
say,
okay.
but,
Go ahead. Go
but
ahead.
I want to hear what you have to say first before I go back and throw my 2 cents in again.
Are we good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, as we know through our years of experience, that we hire a consultant to justify our rate increases and for our targets, okay? We've had consultants up here, and you've done a great job, so I appreciate that so far. But the targets have been given to the consultants, I believe, of what we need to do to estimate our debt service. As you see from the agenda, consideration of solid waste rate adjustments, I would have to disagree with the mayor, because I don't think the rates have to stay the same. She stated that they have to stay the same, but we also have the flexibility of adjusting this based on our targets if we disagree with the consultant's goal, you know what I mean, as far as for the impact that it may have on our residents. So, you know, we could come up with a totally different plan, but this is a great target here for what our expectations are, because it's supposed to be based on the cost of service. So when you change the structure with a consultant, you're changing the cost of service based on, because you change all the parameters of what your goals are. So I just want to make sure that we understand each other, that we have that flexibility. She asked an excellent question, Councilman Cordova. We can change it. I think you asked also, Jeremy, that do we have some flexibility? We certainly do, so we need to be really careful on what we do approve, because it's not set in stone. You know, we may have to adjust things. You know, we're over here saying, well, it's 50% or 40%, but if we don't want it to be that, then they have to adjust their graphs, you know, the green lines that are up there. So just keep that in mind, okay? Because these are huge. These are going to have an impact on our residents. We do have people that are still having a hard time with, you know, their utilities and everything, and I get it. We put it toward the last end of it, but they're still huge, you know, and we don't know what's going to happen. Thank you.
Councilmember Cordova.
Okay, so although I could subscribe to the idea that consulting reports and studies can be made to order, I would respectfully disagree that this consultant, or in this situation, we're actually looking at something that is made to order, because you can't deny the actual revenue that we bring in, and you can't deny the cost of doing business in that landfill. And I think it's a reasonable picture of what the rising cost and continued rising costs are going to be in the next few years. So I do accept the rate study. What I think is, I don't think that we should try to control how the percentages get kind of distributed throughout the next few years. I think the consultant said that it could be done, that we could maybe perhaps spread it out a little better so that it's not so heavy on the first or second year, and that while still understanding he has a full knowledge of what the restrictions are and what our requirements are to meet the financial demands. So I would propose then, here's the motion, that we bring it back with a revised proposed increase, and that we allow staff or the consultant to bring that back and paint us a better picture of how we can slather this throughout the years, rather than, again, creating that initial major impact in year 1 and year 2.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I'll give you a second, but I'm going to look to the future and say there's going to be a run on 65-gallon containers and illegal dumping.
If I could, I don't know if am I okay to say something?
Absolutely, because again, we're trying to formulate the best motion, and if we don't get some feedback that the motion, you might be adding some clarity to the motion that she's making,
So I've been part of this process since I started as Management Services Director in January. And looking at the different inputs and the model that Mr. Davis has put together. We took the data and let the data drive the results. The big reason why we weren't looking for any particular answer. The higher start or the bigger numbers at the beginning have a lot to do with the fact that we have this $5 million debt that we need to meet a debt service ratio for. We need to be able to have that coverage in order to be able to take out the debt to be able to do the stormwater program. And so we looked at other ways of making it work so that it was more smooth. And we couldn't get we looked at those, we asked them, can we make this smoother? And I don't remember at least a time when we were able to see that a better answer than what we are presenting to you today.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, maybe we'll be surprised by the accounts receivable and we won't need all of that debt. That's going to come up for the discussion. It's just, I think the intent was that we'll look at variable options, understanding we need the debt ratio done initially. But if we have $1.5 million owed to us, maybe we don't need to implement as high of a rate at that time. Like you said, you'll know tomorrow.
So what I'm hearing from Councilmember Starbuck as part of revisiting Councilmember Cordova's motion is that information would be key to being able to make that decision, because if that outstanding debt is much higher than $1 million and something that we may have to look at how long it impacts us, it may not be something we can more smoothly in order to meet our debt service.
Right, and the accounts receivable is booked as an asset on our accounts.
Okay.
And so it's already recognized as revenue. And so I'm not understand, and maybe Dean can help me understand that a little bit better as far as how the accounts receivable would impact the study, but I don't see that correlation. Okay.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarity.
So yeah, because we've already, when you book a receivable,
Right.
It's recognized as an asset, and so it's already
Right.
included as a revenue.
Right.
We just haven't received the cash yet.
Right, but if we expect to have to write it off because we're not actually receiving it, I think is his question, right? His question is there this possibility? And if it is that many that haven't paid their bills and they aren't going to because they've historically not paid that, and the pandemic has allowed them to be covered by some of the funds that have come out of the state, but that is something we're going to have to write off. That isn't something that we can depend on as a revenue, right?
Well, we have a policy for how we go about writing off what we would call bad debt.
Right.
And we have not had to revise that policy over the last couple of years.
Okay,
So-
all right. So Starbucks' concern isn't as big a concern as implied.
Right, the accounts receivable that we have outstanding is not impactful to this rate study.
Okay, all right, thanks for that clarity. All right, so we have a motion on the floor that Councilmember Cordova is asking for staff and the consultant to come back and give us options that smooth out the transition to these higher rates, but also, because we need it, helps us meet that debt limit and show where they shortfall of that and how that will impact us is, I think, the best way to look at that, right? Because that's still an important criteria for us to meet the $5 million cost of retrofit.
That is correct. That's
Okay.
exactly how I want to look
Okay.
at it.
Okay. Councilmember Ball first.
I would second that.
Okay, and a second, Councilmember Vega? Anything to add?
I get a turn? Okay, thank you. We heard two answers, and Christy, I appreciate it, and the consultant, you obviously are professionals and know exactly what you're doing, but we received two answers here, okay? One was, are there any variables or variances in how to smooth out the impact to our residents, okay? And the other end, you said, we looked at all the variables and we couldn't come up with that same methodology to meet our debt service, okay? So on the other end, because I'm speaking to the public and the people of Lompoc so they can understand that you said there was no target, but there was because there was debt service, okay, that you were trying to match and meet, because you said yourself that we're trying to get financing for it, and if we don't have a certain amount coming in the beginning, we're not going to qualify for any kind of financing. Did I hear that correctly? Because under your answer, the second answer, it sounded like there aren't any other options, and we're looking for some way of smoothing it out. But, you know, if you have to qualify for financing, I'm not, you know, that's on your end, you know. You're the professional there.
So we had parameters and constraints that we needed to meet, but we did not have a rate in mind or a percentage increase in mind when we were looking at those numbers. We had revenue streams that we needed to meet in order to be able to qualify for the debt service.
I got you, and thank you. I just wanted that clarified because it seemed like I was getting 2 or 3 different answers here, okay? Because what's the use of bringing it back if you guys have already met all your targets and your criteria is solid, and that's the only way you can get your debt service paid?
And I don't know if Dave can talk a little bit about how much we have, what the different scenarios he's already looked at, and whether...
No, I'm good with that. I trust you guys. I just want to make that point.
Yeah, because the money needs to be spent this year, right? Because construction's going to start pretty quick here. So if it was going to start in 2 or 3 years, I think you'd have that flexibility.
Okay, and we needed to hear that. Thank you.
So, the motion still stands to just bring it back and show us that this might be the only option we have to meet that debt service, but we'd like to at least see what the other options were. So that's the motion on the floor of, we realize this meets all the criteria, but was there an option that got us almost as close and still maybe met the debt criteria? And if not, you'll prove it, is what Councilmember Cordova's looking for in the request.
I would just go back to the issue at the question right now is, can we put out a public notice? And can we issue the Prop 218 notice at this point for the 45 days? One of the thoughts that I have is we do have, we're working on a utility commission meeting on August 8th. And that is something that we could bring there, some additional options, and show, we looked at trying to do these percentages, and that's what it did to this graph. And we tried to look at these percentages, and it did this to that graph, and get their input. And then bring those as well to the public hearing itself. Because we can make changes and drop rates after we issue the public notice.
So the public notice that you would get ready to issue, which states what the rates might be, could still go out, but we could have the utility commission review it, provide input, you bring all that information back as part of the input, and then take it into consideration and either move forward with the rates published or adjust those rates and still move forward despite they weren't the published rates?
Correct, as long as they are not higher than the published rates.
Okay.
As long as they are not higher, meaning we couldn't make the rates in 2025 and 26 higher than what the rates are in the notice.
Okay, so
And if
that
you're
was-
smoothing it out, they might be higher in
And they might be
25 and
higher
26.
later on. So that would have been my next question.
Okay.
Okay, and so we can't issue that notice the way it is currently written, because we don't have what
Right,
the
we don't have
highest
that,
rate
no.
is. Okay, so this would then effectively move the 45-day hearing out till after the next meeting.
Correct. And that would then move the rate increase from what we have done in the rate study of October 1st to potentially November 1st or December 1st, and all the implications of that.
Right. Okay. Thank you for all of that clarity and for those additional questions. Councilmember Vega.
One more question, Janelle. On the motion, you mentioned for them to bring back any kind of variables or whatever, but you also mentioned if there aren't any changes, that we're actually approving that. Is that what you're saying?
So this motion, what we were working on tonight was approving the rate discussion so they could mail out the notice to the public, and it has very specific numbers in it. But because of that, we can't do that. And so what this is going to do is delay that, because if those numbers change, what we were prepared to send out can't go out because of that variability. And so when they come back, they're going to have several options that we can look at and see how do we get to the rates we need to be at, but also meet our debt relief, and is there a smoother transition or not, and then we can send out that notice.
Okay, so we're not actually approving it tonight?
No.
Okay.
We're asking it to come back.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we had a motion by Ms. Cordova and a second by Mr. Ball, and any clarifying questions? I see no head, a head no nod from our city clerk. And I think I've clarified everything for anybody and everybody, and I'm getting confused, so let's vote.
I thought I had the second.
You can have the second. All right, I wrote the wrong initials down, because,
I don't want to confuse you.
that's fine, no. Mr. Starbuck, you can have it. I am just glad there was a second already, and I'm sure the clerk knew who it actually was. Okay, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right. Did we have any additional written communications that were not discussed earlier this evening?
No, ma'am, nothing.
All right. Final oral communications for 2 minutes. You have the floor. The number is 805-875-8201, 805-875-8201. The floor is now open.
Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc, mayor, council members. I believe that it's time for staff to give another presentation on cost allocation and and enterprise reimbursement. Every single time you talk money and budgetary, that comes back. And I know in the past, not too far back, there's been other cities that have been legally challenged on that and lost, and there's been litigation back and forth. In the spirit of transparency for the residents, especially when you're passing these types of rate hikes, it would be good that everybody up there has a very firm grasp of how these transfers are being made back and forth. Just in the spirit of transparency, especially for historic purposes too, because we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars that are shuffled around the city with entries in accounting books. You really need to understand that. We really need to see it from a public standpoint to kind of be able to accept a little bit better these kind of rate increases. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Mosby, resident of Lompoc. You had a lot of questions up there. Some of them were an answer to you. Sat in that chair where Councilmember Ball sat for 6 years. Before that, a utility commissioner. Unfortunately, you guys didn't hear from your utility commission. So if you read historically, the utility commission shall be advisory to the council, not at the whim. I know Councilmember Cordova's been asking for them to be commission meetings. They're not here. That's our public utility commission, the PUC for the people of Lompoc. They don't go to Sacramento. They come here. But they haven't been able to come here because you haven't had meetings, that they shall be advisory. Another item that's of importance to remember that more than a cost of service is a tax. So questions have been asked about putting money in buckets and setting aside. That's more than cost of service. That's potentially cost of service for future service. Now you can have a tax, you got to put it on and pass it on the ballot. But you can't charge more than cost of service for the utility, otherwise it's a tax and you must treat it as a tax. That's why you can't save for a trash truck 10 years from now. Because if you're gone out of this town, you bought a truck for somebody else, and that's more than your cost of service. So a question was asked, why were trash trucks bought before? So I don't know if you've all been introduced to the intranet at the City of Lompoc, if they let you get on there. If you pull the green sheets, former Mayor Lynn used to pull the green sheets every year. And if you go look at the green sheets that are by line by line by line, you will see that actually a trash truck was being billed to solid waste for many, many years, each year, but they never received it. They had the commingling of fleet acquisition. You heard the new city manager mention a little bit, and he's tried to clean it up significantly. For many years, 62% of every vehicle purchase was being billed to solid waste. Commingling fleet maintenance is also still happening, that's 66%. You heard about enterprise reimbursement. A year and a half ago was told laws have changed. You probably need to do a new study. That enterprise reimbursement was never approved by council. You're taking $600,000 a year and from solid waste and putting it into the general fund. You might question yourself about that, and should you be doing that? It was said the new study needed to be done. You haven't done one, you probably should do that.
Anyone else? Seeing no one call and no one else rise, we will close oral communications and bring it back to council, and we'll start with you, Mr. Starbuck.
I have no reports.
All right, Councilmember Cordova?
I have no reports.
And Councilmember Ball?
Just a couple quick things. Had the honor of attending, and Ms. Ann McCarty mentioned it earlier, but a beautiful celebration of these young women that were on their bicycles, starting up north, going all the way to San Diego. The Pedal the Pacific folks, we got to celebrate their hard work and bringing a lot of spotlight to the issue of human trafficking. So I learned a lot from that, and was very impressed with just the caliber of people that we met to come through our town. So that was very interesting, and I'm really proud of our community for the response that it showed and for being so welcoming. I am looking forward to the Lompoc Police Department car cruise, which is happening this Friday, August 5th, starts at 5 o'clock. That's always really cool. And then the following day, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the Lompoc Police Department's car show, and that's going to be at Ryan Park. And I believe that starts at 9 a.m. So if you're looking for something to do Friday and Saturday, we got you covered a little bit at least. And last thing, somebody can help me with the date. I don't ride skateboard anymore, but there's a skateboard competition coming. Does anyone have details on that?
August 20th?
August 20th.
Saturday, August 20th, 7 years of age and older.
Okay.
And the Parks and Rec page has registration.
Okay, so spread the word. We got a lot of young kids out there, young people ride skateboards. If they're any good, you might consider August 20th. There's a skateboard competition hosted by the city. That should be really fun. So just putting it out there. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Vega.
I'd like to thank you guys for hanging in there. There's many of you that are here still that are awake. There's a lot of talk, and it's hard to pay attention and stay with the issues, but there's a lot of money at stake here, and we want Lompoc to thrive. I can tell you from my personal experience, I'd like to see the impact where you guys see it visually, instead of hear about how much money we spent. I think the impact would be nice if we saw our parks and we saw our city just visually blossom and turn into a place you want to be. So that's what we're striving to do. So thank you.
All right, couple of meetings and invitations. I attended the Civil Air Patrol Citizens Program for youth age 12 through 21 out at Vandenberg Space Force Base. This was the first year that it actually was at Vandenberg instead of at Edwards, because they were focusing on rockets and that job and avenue of technical career. So I didn't know Civil Air Patrol actually still existed, so it was really interesting and fascinating to see all these young people very interested in the future of our aerospace, Space Force. Also attended at the invitation of the base, Ron Cortopassy's retirement after 39 years. He started his career there and ended it. It was amazing, and everyone was trying to convince him to stay one more year, but he said that 1 year was like dog years, so he was done at 39. So I just want to say thank you to his service, because without him, the base wouldn't have become as safe as it is. He implemented over his 39 years some of the key safety protocols that now keep our community safe with the work he's done out there. Air Pollution Control District meetings, Santa Barbara County Area Government meeting, the Pedal the Pacific reception. Those were amazing young women, and I just want to thank AAUW and the Rape Crisis Center for organizing it all. We lost our former fire chief, Jerry Curris, and I had the honor of attending his funeral, and very honorable man. We were very lucky to have him for the window that we did, and I apologize to his family and to our fire family for their loss. Empty Bowls came back, exceeded their expectations. It was a great day. It was so lovely to see so many of you out supporting the organization. They do so much work in our community. Without them, the inequity in food for so many of our citizens wouldn't have been addressed during the pandemic. So thank you for them and all of you for supporting it. NCPA, the National California Power Agency that we are members of. Recent meeting was in Murphy's, and I traveled, and that fund pays for that attendance. And then the Santa Barbara County Joint Cities Affordable Housing Task Force participated in that, finding out what all the other communities around us are doing in order to support that demand. I want to thank the Elks Lodge, as well as those that worked on and created the film. Lompoc resident Joe Valencia and Dennis Ford created the documentary recording the history of the Honda Canyon fire, and it has gone on to some film festivals and won some awards, and they showed it this past weekend at the Elks Lodge, Firestorm 77. So if you get a chance to watch it, it is amazing history of the massive fire that happened out at the base in 1977, and some of our local heroes and some of the lessons learned that are now implemented across many fire departments dealing with the wildfires that are out there. We have an election going on. The window is open for Mayor, District 2 and District 3. The nomination window closes Friday, August the 12th. If one of the incumbents doesn't file, it gets extended for a week until the 17th. If you would like to run, you may contact Stacy Haddon, our city clerk, at 875-8241 and make an appointment to come in and get your paperwork. There's more information on the maps on our city website if you want to make sure you're in the right neighborhood. Our airport got some wonderful coverage in 2 magazines, national magazines, Cessna Flyer and Piper Flyer magazine. We had an article specifically on the Lompoc City Airport and the Cub Fly-In, so I just want to thank Steve Ells with those magazines for doing that coverage. It's always great to be on the cover of the magazine, and so that's really cool. I want to also congratulate a Lompoc youth, Anya Gallardo, for her appointment to the Fund of Santa Barbara Youth's Making Change Project. We have a youth representing our community on an important group that focuses on empowering and opening up equity opportunities for youth. That same organization, fundforsantabarbara.org, is having their fall funding cycle. So if that is something you're working on, youth equity in our community, please go to their website. They have 2 more free webinars tomorrow and Thursday about that grant application, and that deadline is the 29th. The library is having an August reading challenge, 2 different age groups. Go to the library website, see if you want to participate. Such a great turnout for the last challenge that I encourage everybody to participate again. And I have nothing else to report, so thank you all for being here tonight, and we'll adjourn until the next regular meeting at 6:30 p.m. on August 16th, 2022.